Well, this is a bit of a surprise. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Cowabunga collection from Konami and Digital Eclipse, released in 2022 for Nintendo Switch. Also available for the current PlayStation and Xbox platforms as well as PC via Steam. Just to get one piece of business out of the way, no, I have yet to play Shredder's Revenge, which is a baffling thought considering how I grew up with these turtle dudes and such. A substantial part of my developing years, as it were. But if I'm going to be honest, this was the Turtles thing that I was looking forward to the most. A collection of 13 turtle-powered Konami classics, along with a bevy of extras. And I will go so far to say that this is the best Konami collection released to date, based purely on the overall presentation and supplementary material included. The various anniversary collections released in past years were fairly basic. Only a few games, some Japanese variants, and a collector's booklet of sorts, in a digital format. But diving into the Turtles lair, you'll find box art, you'll find full manual scans that you could skim through, developer documents, press material, listen to soundtracks, and there's even a handy-dandy strategy guide that helps you out with some of the games if you want to peer into that. If you're into looking at that sort of stuff, there's plenty of it to be found here, and a good hour or so will be spent just looking at this stuff alone. I personally dig looking at the manuals. They're a bit of a flashback. Some of the ads included here, I didn't expect to keep them, especially for some of the handhelds that they put out. That was kind of neat. In any event, the Cowabunga collection comprises 13 Ninja Turtles video games, the NES trilogy, the Game Boy trilogy, both the original Turtles arcade game and Turtles in Time, the SNES version of Turtles in Time, the Sega Genesis Hyperstone Heist, and the distinct tournament fighter games for the NES, SNES, and Sega Genesis. Both arcade games, the SNES Tournament Fighters and the Hyperstone Heist, also has online play with rollback code for those into that sort of thing. Haven't tested it myself, but I've heard people say good things about it. And of course, there is the option for local multiplayer for games that support it, or couch co-op as the cool kids call it. You know, the thing that Amico Vision Guide says doesn't exist anymore. So all these games played as they originally did on their respective consoles, and we'll go through these fairly quickly. You've got the original NES Ninja Turtles, which has that somewhat mixed reception. Some like it, others hate it. It's definitely a flawed game, but there are worse titles to play on the NES. There's Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, the NES port of the original Turtles arcade game. People really like this game. I'm not a big fan of it actually, either as an arcade conversion or even on its own thing. Arcade game, which is also on here, has a fun energy and vibe to it that this version lacks. Even with 2 new levels, I'm like, nah, not for me. The third NES game, the Manhattan Project, is more my deal. Slightly more moves, each turtle has their own special move. There's some fun stages and bosses to be had here. You've got Turtles in Time, both the arcade game, which I've never actually played. I've played the original arcade game, pumped many a quarters into that thing, but not Turtles in Time. The only version I played was the Super Nintendo version, which, despite being a 2-player game, is actually the more worthwhile version, because yes, it has a couple tweaks here and there and some extra bits, like an extra level and such. Hyperstone Heist is Turtles in Time, slightly retooled for the Genesis. Not quite the same game, and there is some new stuff, but it's deja vu recycled bits for the most part, and there's even some stuff from the original arcade game that made the cut here. You have the 3 Game Boy games, Follow the Foot Clan, which is a so-so action game, Back from the Sewers, which is a meh action game at best, and the one I was most interested in, the Radical Rescue one, which is a more open-ended action-adventure, search-action sort of game. The original cart is rare and expensive, though this collection is a nice, cheaper alternative, even though this costs more than previous collections. And then finally you have 3 distinct tournament fighter games as they appeared on the NES, the SNES, and the Mega Drive. SNES version is the best of the bunch, hence why it's got the online multiplayer, but the Genesis version is a lesser, yet still worthy fighter, and even the NES version is a bit of an interesting curiosity piece, one of the few competent attempts at a Street Fighter-esque fighting game on the system. Now, unlike the Anniversary collections, which were done by M2, and don't get me wrong, they did a phenomenal job with those games, this is a Digital Eclipse project. They were responsible for the first Mega Man Legacy collection, I believe, and a couple other things as well. So they added a couple extra bits to enhance the experience somewhat, such as the ability to remove slowdown and sprite flicker from the NES games to make them more tolerable for some folks, as well as enabling some hidden cheats like adding extra lives, playable bosses for the various tournament fighter games, as well as an option to enable a nightmare mode for the 2 arcade games, which basically hammers you with a shit ton of enemies and occasional bouts of slowdown. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea, make of that what you will from this scenario. And some games also allows you to start on any level, like a little stage select thing. And of course, some additional options in regards to customizable controls per game, the ability to save state, rewind feature, and viewing sizes, including full-size 4x3-esque display with optional screen filters. Thank you very much. I don't know why that's so hard to implement, Konami, for fuck's sake. And of course, each game has their own custom screen border that you could turn off if you prefer. They're basically using the box art assets and move some stuff around. Some work, some don't. I would have liked the option for something more generic as an additional option. I'll tell you why later, but whatever. In terms of the overall emulation of these games, it's pretty solid actually. The NES games play about as well as you'd expect them to, and the enhanced options certainly help to improve things a bit, I suppose, lack of a better term. The arcade games allow up to 4 players to join in on the fun, but offer a character select feature for less than 4-player games. Neither version has additional options you could toggle like difficulty and such, but you can hammer the start button as many times as you want to have load up on lives if you want, so have fun on that front, I guess. The SNES games play alright, ditto on the Genesis stuff, and the Game Boy games also run perfectly fine. I'm sure this is all riveting technical information, but honestly, I've little issues with the games as they are presented and emulated. They work like they're supposed to, there's some extra options to enhance the experiences somewhat, and the quality of the games themselves are generally good to great. So I've said some nice things about the Cowabunga collection, but of course there are some caveats and reservations to this praise. Once again, only 1 save state per game. Lame. Especially after the previous Konami collection, Castlevania Advance Collection, gave you about 10 per game. The Japanese versions also have their own save state, so it's a bit of a cheat, but those versions also have their own minor differences as well, so it's not quite the same thing. Part of me is rather surprised there's no options for the arcade games, as there would be with other arcade compilations, being able to play around with the dip switch-esque options instead of just... When you choose the full-size screen option, all it does is just zoom in on the game screen to sort of emulate 4x3 display, which means the border art gets cut off on the sides, and that's why you have some of the title logos bleeding off the screen in the footage, if you will. It's part of the reason why I would have liked something a little more generic in border designs that would have looked nice on any display option, but whatever. And while I'm not going to be using the online all that much myself, only 4 of the games get that particular option. I can understand the NES games or the Game Boy games, but the SNES Turtles in Time or the other Tournament Fighter games, those aren't worthy of online? I find that odd. Actually, they seem to really have it for the Genesis Tournament Fighters because this game has no strategies in that strategy guide to help you out, so if you want to learn some moves, you'll have to resort to reading the manuals, which are included at least, so that's something, I suppose. Anyway, that's my summation of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection, and it's a totally tubular, radical, outrageous, whatever dated 80s jargon you want to toss in there or something. But this is a really sweet package. They've done an incredible job with this. The games are your usual mix of great and not so great choices, the extra bits are plentiful and worth checking out, and a far cry from Konami's earlier anniversary collections, which I still do enjoy, but feel understandably bare bones compared to this. It's one of those things you'd never expect to happen because licensed video games of this ilk rarely get revived unless it's retooled to fit some modern interpretation or whatever the case may be, but this existing is a great thing. And even if you're not a fan of this particular incarnation of Ninja Turtles or just the Turtles in general, if you enjoy dwelling into classic video games, you do owe it to yourself to give the Cowabunga collection a shot. The price might be a bit on the steep side, but I will say this without reservation, this was totally worth the money. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Cowabunga Collection has more than earned a Chevy Nova. Nobody is going to get that.